Hey Reddit, what's the strangest coincidence you've ever personally experienced? In freshman physics, I became friends with the Japanese kid next to me. After a while he was helping me with my Japanese homework, did really well after that. But after that class, we kinda drifted apart. Fast forward 2 years where I'm an exchange student in Japan over the summer and doing some sightseeing in Kyoto after the program. I'm crossing the street in Kyoto and I hear my name being called out. I look around and there he is. Thousands of miles apart we meet again. We got some drinks and good food together. It was a blast. No, his hometown was not Kyoto, he was also doing sightseeing while home for the summer. When I was 18, I lived in a town a very long ways away from where I ended up moving. I struck up a friendship with this guy from work in that town. We play Halo, watch movies, etc. and he was awesome. I ended up moving suddenly due to a family emergency and never got his contact information. I didn't even remember his name a decade later, but I thought of him often as he was an awesome guy through all the years. 11 years later, I'm working at my job, carpooling with someone from my training class, and one night he asks if I mind his roommate being in the car as he was going to take the car after we got off at work and use it for the night. He introduces us. I turn around, and in the back seat is the guy from the town a very long ways away. We reconnected immediately, and now live together. He's my best friend, for sure, and the godfather to my children. I used to get 2 buses home from work. I got off the first one having left my phone and keys on the front seat of the bus without realizing. Got on the second bus, went to my favored front seat and my possessions that I didn't know were missing were waiting for me. The bus had changed driver and route. Still freaks me out to this day. Went to college, met a cute girl. Where do you go to high school? She asks. You've never heard of it, I reply. I grew up in a town of 1,200 people, graduated in a class of about 90. Try me, she says. And that was the beginning of finding out that not only had she heard of it, she had almost attended it because her family had lived in one of the neighboring towns very briefly when she was growing up. We shared dozens of mutual friends, and had apparently spent our young lives narrowly missing each other. Later, after we started dating, we learned that one of our mutual friends had been trying to set us up with each other for years. She was overwhelmed with laughter when she saw that we were finally together, completely without her involvement. I asked her to marry me, she said yes. We went out to dinner with our parents so they could finally meet. Her folks arrive at the restaurant and see mine. Her mom goes, "Oh hey, my dad's name. So this is your son, huh?" They had been co-workers years ago. Of course. We've been married for 11 years now. Got a good thing going. We intend to keep it. In grade 10 English class, the teacher didn't have anything planned for us to do and it was close to the end of the year I guess, so she goes to the big Cupo board in the corner and pulls out a stack of copies. It's examples of a successful essay written during a final exam, so we can learn what a good one looks like and how to build a narrative, etc. The topic of these was what was the most pivotal moment of your life? There's 3 examples, ranging in proficiency. We read through the first 2, and I volunteer to read the last one aloud. I start reading, and I stop. The essay was about me. My big sister had gotten a really good mark 6 years earlier on her final exam essay which she wrote about the day I was born. I got pretty emotional about that one. When I was a kid, around 13, I played a lot of a video game called Diablo 2. I started a clan with a few people I'd met on the internet and we played every day. At some point we were helping some random person and he asked to join. We thought he was nice enough so we let him in. As part of this clan we had a shared account we used to store game items for each other. After about a month of playing, this new guy goes in and changed the password, steals the account and defriends everyone. Completely disappears off the map with all of our stuff. Fast forward a year later and my family moves to Texas and it's my first day at school. I'm sitting in algebra class talking to the person in the seat next to me and he mentions he plays Diablo. I said me too and that I ran a clan and everything. I asked his username and it was him. 2,000 miles away from where I first virtually met this guy, he's sitting next to me in math class. When I told him mine, his face went into total shock and he didn't know how to respond. It was awkward for sure. Ended up telling him I didn't care and was over it, but let's just say we didn't end up becoming friends. Was sitting in a restaurant about 200 miles from where I live telling my mother, who was visiting from a different country, about a trip I had to another country, about 6,000 miles away, with a work colleague, and the lady at the table next to us leans over and says, "I think you're talking about my son." Turns out I was sitting next to my colleague's parents while showing my mum pictures of our trip. One year I got a roommate through Craigslist. The guy was weird for sure, but good natured and paid rent. Anyway, after about 2 months of living with him, my cousin comes over to hang. I introduce the two and my cousin in the most chill voice ever said, "Nah man, we know each other." Turns out they were college roommates 5 years earlier in another state. Started dating this girl a few weeks ago. We get to talking about where we live, etc. She lives in not only the same building but exact same apartment I lived in 2 years ago. It was so freaking bizarre walking into my old apartment that I never thought I would see again. What are the odds? Nobody believes me when I tell this story, but one day my husband and I ran into the same couple at 3 different places, in 2 different states. So my husband and I had an errand to run out of state. We leave early and stop to get breakfast. The couple was sitting across from us. The lady had on a funky shirt, which is why she stuck out in my mind. After breakfast we drive the next state over to the office we have an appointment at. We're waiting in the lobby and a couple from the breakfast joint walks in. Weird. So we spend the day finishing up our errands and then we drive back home. I didn't feel like cooking, so we stopped to get some dinner at the pub. We sit down at a table and guess who's already eating at the table behind us? The same friggin' couple. I wanted my husband to accompany me down to the parking garage in our building to grab something from our car. He was already in his PJ pants and didn't want to come. I convinced him no one would see us, and he reluctantly agreed. We got on the elevator and rode down 1 floor before it stopped to let someone on. The largest, buffest man steps into the elevator wearing his own PJ pants. He said nothing, but gave my husband the dude head nod before getting off on the main floor and disappearing forever. We've never seen him since. I have an uncommon last name and a not too common first name. I was in the hospital for a surgery and the person in the next room was there for the same surgery. Come to find out that we were second cousins and never knew that the other existed. He had the same name as me and his wife had the same name as my wife. Back in the early mid-90s, the phone system changed and you no longer needed to dial the area code for a long distance in-state call. We're a small state with only one area code. One morning I woke up to the phone ringing and when I picked up I recognized the voice on the other end as belonging to my old boss from a few years ago. She had an unmistakable voice. We had a nice conversation for a bit before she realized she had dialed the wrong number. I lived in a different town in a different part of the state, but the number must have been off by only 1 digit from the one she'd tried to call. To add to the coincidence, I had overslept and would have been late for work if she hadn't called me and woken me up. Worked half day. Drove 6 hours from Southern California to Northern California for car camping with my wife. Chose obscure campground which was neatly deserted, off-season. Picked the most deserted and remote campsite location. We planned on rocking the tent. Were bummed after setting camp and another couple selects site right next to us. Turns out to be a co-worker I'd spoken with earlier that day. Edit. I hadn't told co-worker anything about plans. We weren't close. Earlier that day we spoke briefly of work-related issue. Was at the dentist getting a crown extension. Dentist, hey, you were born on the 13th of July, so was I. Assistant, me too. We all shared a look of surprise and longing with each other. Longing to be closer. Then they drilled the absolute crap out of my teeth. My favorites occurred during separate canoe trips. The first was during a Labor Day weekend trip up and down the street. Croix River, 2 days paddling upstream, 1 down, which runs between Wisconsin and Minnesota and eventually joins the Mississippi River. Despite it being a holiday weekend, there was virtually no traffic on the river, as we saw only one other boat and that was on the first day shortly after we left. On the second day out, the weather was quite warm. At one point I said, boy, a watermelon sure would be good right about now. My 3 companions told me to shut up and not even mention it, because we didn't have one and weren't going to find one in the wilderness. A little while later we spotted a green object floating toward us that turned out to be a watermelon. Years later I was on a river outing with several other people on the Whitewater River in Indiana. I was paddling my kayak and had just told the watermelon story to the people in the canoe next to me. It was a hot summer day, and someone said something to the effect of watermelons are fine, but I could really go for a cold beer right now. A few minutes later we paddled around a bend and saw a cooler sitting on a sandbar. We stopped on the sandbar, opened the cooler, and found that it contained just enough cold beers for each of us to have one. Appalachian trail hikers refer to occurrences like this as trail magic. I guess it happens on rivers too. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more videos and don't forget to like the video if you've enjoyed it.